I'm not from Milwaukee, but I'm all about the Bucks.
Are you just baiting me?
No, I'm not.
Go on then, fine, fuck it. Explain to me what that was.
That is a line from Norman Sands' Dance at the Funeral, in which he says, I'm not from Milwaukee, but I'm all about the Bucks. And that is referencing the NFL team Milwaukee Bucks.
Oh, Bucks is in like a deer. Like, I get you.
Yeah. No, sorry. Milwaukee Bucks are the basketball team. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know anything about basketball, okay? They throw it in the hoop and people go, yay! And it happens a lot.
I think I like basketball more than football in a certain way. I don't watch either of them. I watch basketball less than football even, so I can't chat really.
Do you mean NFL football? Do you mean like actually football?
Oh, like European football.
Oh.
But I don't watch any American sports, I guess is the right way of saying it. But I think if you made me say like, if you said to me like, okay, Joe, you're going to spend all of your life being an athlete, what would you want to? Would you rather be basketball or football? I think I would choose basketball. I think that's where my heart would lie. I just don't like running.
Do you like sprinting?
I like sprinting. That's the thing. I don't like running long distances. I like explosive, movement a lot more.
Fair. I'm very predictable with that. If I were to be asked that question, yeah, I'd like to be a footballer, please.
Yeah, but you are one. Like you have you've already taken the choice into your own hands.
Fair, just not very far. I took the steps, and there was a step too far, and I fell down the stairs. But here we are. Yeah. So that was that. Norman Sands, a rapper. You should listen to that song. YouTube recommendations. Their music tastes and choices aren't that bad. So you end up just getting recommended some half decent things. A lot of it is really like just batshit, why am I listening to this? And some of it is Norman Sand, which is pretty good. It's like old school style hip hop, rap music and stuff. Mm-hmm. Anyway, this is Silly Wells, is a mental health podcast, and we discuss things that are a little bit, possibly triggering and things like that, like, mental health, suicidal thoughts and all the things that will get us demonetized on YouTube if we were even monetized to begin with. This podcast is for everyone, but it might not be for you. And we are all very much okay with that. Do you know what you guys should listen to, though? If you want something different. I'm learning French at the moment, so I'm going to just, shout out a random French podcast here. Because what they do is, if you're trying to learn French like me, and my slow ass, you could listen along to a French podcast in which they speak really slowly, which is called Little Talk in Slow French. And, if you can get past the fact that it sounds like you're being spoken to like a child because you are a child, because you can't understand what they're saying, and I still don't understand what they're saying half the time. All I know is that they'll talk about the French Revolution, and I was like, cool, I know that because the word for revolution in French is literally that. So, you give that a listen. So then, if you're trying to learn a language, find the adjacent version of that show in the language that you're listening to. That's our show. This is what Silly Wells is. Welcome. I was literally going back through a few episodes now, and I was just going through the data and the analytics of it all, and I realized that we have a very consistent listenership. And at first, I was like, it's just us listening back to the episodes. And then I realized that I went on my Apple Podcasts and I realized that I haven't listened to the last 10 episodes. So it's not just me and you only listen to it once over anyway, which means we have a consistent listenership of over 25 to 30 people. I said over 25 to 30. Over 25 people, which is really fun. I enjoy that quite a lot.
That's actually amazing. Yeah.
And we've done very little marketing. Well, I say marketing, very little like I guess advertising or like attempts to get exposure and things like that. Even that, like I have an Instagram account with just under 1,000 followers. I've only posted about the show once, and even then, it wasn't me that posted about it. It was like um, uh, clips. We need clips. I spoke to Joe before this. So I said, hey, before I get the whip out, look, find some clips, Joe. And Joe was like, yeah, sure.
You're allowing me to have a job, which I am immediately happy to do.
Yeah. You know, speaking of jobs, given that we're both looking for jobs, I mentioned, I think I mentioned last week on the show about me having a stay of execution with an interview. So that interview in person happened, and I've passed that interview. Little did I know until the very end of that said interview in person that there's 2 stages to this interview. So I was like, so what? So like at the end, they were like, oh yeah, so like so what we'll do is we'll get back to you with the outcome of the interview, and if you pass, they'll be going to the second stage of the interview, and then from there. And the minute they said that, I just trailed off in my head. I was like, second stages, stage what? And I realized that a lot of these like places you work for now in the modern world of work, they have multiple stage interviews. And I've heard horror stories about these things, like a 4-stage interview process. And it's like, it's a lot to go through. I don't want to do that shit, Joe.
I think if you're working in areas which have high rotation, is that the word for it? Like some of the jobs that I've been in, where the expectation is that lots of people will leave. Turnover rate. That's it. Yeah, if you have a very high turnover rate in a job, I think the number of interviews tends to be a lot less because they don't because the timing on it is just that they would rather get you in quickly, and also they'll probably pick out quite a few people at a time because sometimes with the turnover rate being the way it is, there might be more than one application available, and they want to kind of just fill them in quickly. And they don't particularly care about the difference between you and another person. They'll just go off of whatever differences they can find. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that going to uni or having high grades in things like actually matters for the jobs I've applied for in terms of like, I've not needed those qualifications, but I know from conversations with people during interviews that they care about that purely for this, in the sense that they think you're like, they will care about it comparing you to someone else, even though it doesn't really make a difference in the long run. It doesn't really mean I'm better than someone else at a certain kind of job. It's just their way of like, the presumption about going to these things and getting these qualifications is that, oh, it must mean that you are more productive or a better worker or whatever, like for whatever it counts to them. I'm not quite convinced of that at all, but I mean, I'm not going to tell them no. So I've never actually had the reason I'm mentioning all this is I've never been in a 2-stage interview. I'm genuinely thinking back, but I think of all the jobs I've always gone in, and there's only ever been 1 stage. I might not know right then, but I would know like they would let me know like a few weeks afterwards. So have they given you like an idea about the second stage in terms of what? Oh, sorry. I mean, obviously, I know that you've only recently learned that you are going to the second stage, but has there been any inkling at any point about what the second stage contains?
I think it's like a test of what I think I might be meeting more people from the organization, whatever it is, and might actually be taking part in like one of their sessions. Now, here's the thing. We found out, when I say me, I say myself and Joe, found out about me getting through this process literally 15, 20 seconds before we started recording.
Yes.
As I literally just remembered. So I find it funny. But also, I have a tendency to completely forget about 2 things in my life. 1, my Instagram account. I forget it exists. 2, my email address. So I, as well as all the other people in my life who I forget about. But I have to be on that. I have to really be on it when it comes to checking my information and checking all of my social media platforms in which I utilize to get these opportunities. It's such a dangerous game to play in the very fast-moving world of employment, it seems. But I am just so cooked. I just want to get to the bit where I have money in my account, Joe. That's all I want.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie as well. You saying that really made me think about how I haven't like missed jobs or anything like that because of not looking at my emails or anything like that. Like I've generally the only time I even think to check my emails is around after applications, and I have my notifications for emails actually really bother me, but I get them on my phone all the time. It's only like some email accounts that I don't use for finding work that I don't get notifications for, right? So, but but having thought about it, I guess we have both known this to be true, but I think it's getting to the point where, like, in me trying to find ways to put my energy somewhere, I think communication has become one of the things I really want to work on, because I'm shit at it, and you're shit at it as well. But I'm worse than you, I think, most of the time, because you are trying to contact me a lot more than I'm trying to contact you, and I'm not always the best at that. So yeah. My full process is actually going to be maybe to just be way more involved in like, not because I've like, basically, I don't know how to explain this. I'm taking away from your job interview thing, but I do want to point this out, because I think that maybe what I'm saying can help you as well. I don't know, because it just depends on how your brain's like fixed, I guess, or whatever. I think I tend to find that if I put like a lot of importance on something, that's how I can engage with it. But importance is in, like, I think there's something fundamentally important about it. If I'm just saying it's a good idea to keep on to keep up with your emails and stuff, because it's a duty to you or whatever, it's a good thing to do because it makes sure that you're in the loop of things. Same with like phones and stuff. If I just kind of think of it as a good thing, that's not good enough, if that makes sense. That doesn't motivate me properly to like actually engage with it. But if I'm thinking to myself, oh, I have to do this, like I have to make it my duty, I have to, like I have to, like if I'm like, oh, I can become the best person that I can, I could see the best person I could possibly be in this. There's definitely some psychological issues with that whole notion there, but or maybe it's not even psychological issues, but I think it's like it's like a cheat code for me to get my brain to start caring about things, or to find something important ultimately, because there's versions of that in my life where I've had to make it a really big aspect of the way I think about the world in order to be able to remind myself and make myself feel motivated to do it. So maybe that will help you. Like the problem is it gets a bit grind setty is the problem. It gets a bit hustle and grind set. You know what I mean? Like in the way that it comes across. But if you really think about, like, a lot of the people who do really well online, for example, like outside of even podcasting, but like just online in general, are almost certainly the kinds of people that are just constantly engaging with anyone that they can, that will provide them. Like, obviously there's people who you might engage with who you're getting the short end of, but there are people who have done extremely well out of essentially just being just engaging a lot. And I mean, the word collab exists for a reason. It's like a big social media thing, because the whole idea of that is just you getting so many connections and stuff. And you can think of it as it's always existed, because there's like, is it soirees? What's the kind of parties you go to where you just go there to connect, like for connections? It's like those sorts of parties as well, really, and things like that,
like mingles and all that shit. Like, yeah,
I don't know
what the actual word is, but
yeah, I think it begins with an S if I'm not wrong. But like, it's those kinds of parties. It's a big thing for artists, right? Like, artists have to go to like parties where like their art might be, to try and get in contact with people who are likely to fund projects and things like that. So yeah, I don't know if that would help you. I don't know if that would. I don't even know if that would help me. But you saying that, and me having thought about a few things recently, I think I want to not just in the professional sense, but very much in the personal relationship sense. I want to push that more. So maybe if I just like conflate the two somewhat into like hey, work on your communication in a very like abstract sense, like just be way more communicative with people. Send a message to someone just to be a bit more up with it, and essentially kind of force a few things into my life by doing so. Maybe that would actually be beneficial to me, and maybe you could look at it that way for yourself. You're busy enough as it is, to be fair, so I don't think you need that to have stuff going on in your life.
Yeah,
But,
like, I've reached a point now where like every single second, like I archive a lot of chats on WhatsApp. So I used to be, I'd archive people who I don't really want to hear from or speak to, who I'm trying to, like, I would archive an ex-girlfriend straight away because I don't want to be reminded of their existence. Okay, even if like I don't care and the breakup was like a mutual thing, I still don't want to be reminded of their existence. At least for a few months anyway. But now I can't do that because I've archived every single group chat of my football club. They are about 45 different group chats, okay? Same with when I was in Cali. There were so many different group chats, so many different organizations. With my football team, there's like 3. I am in around 9 to 10 different group chats. That's a lot.
Can I ask you like a really obvious question? Or someone has a very obvious answer, I imagine. But what does archiving actually do? Because I've never done that. I don't know what the point is of it. But.
It does kind of what it says in that it will move it to a different section of your like WhatsApp screen, and that you have to access the archive in order to dig through it. So it effectively clears up your chat, I don't know what you call it, like all your chats. So if you want to like leave something for later, or maybe you just want to have access to a chat but you're not really talking in it, then you can archive a chat. It's also a really good way just to like to not get notified about something. So if you're in a group chat and you archive it, you won't get notified if somebody messages in it. Like you just have a little one next to it, effectively.
Yeah. So it's more like you're muting it in part, like you're partly muting.
Yeah.
You're limiting it. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't have notifications turned on my phone at all. And people have noticed that. So what happens is you get like a tick if a message gets delivered. When you message me, you get nothing until I check my phone.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have we don't get notification of what you've seen and things like that. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I don't have read receipts on either.
Yeah, I think my brother does. It's the same, actually. I think
but I don't get notified if you message, and I love it. But the idea
I didn't know that.
I have notifications turned off for every single application. So,
okay. Yeah.
And I made that decision a good while back. Like even I made it in my last year of professional wrestling. That's when I made that decision because I was so addicted to my phone. My usage time was like I'll spend 10 plus hours on my phone. Like last week, my phone usage was like 3 hours for the whole week. I was super happy with that, and I want to maintain that idea of just not being connected to this thing that is a connector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I was around people and I was talking to people the whole day and all that stuff. No, it wasn't. But I'm doing something other than scrolling on my phone or trying to like message somebody. Because after time, you don't really need to. It's just, you just want it. Like, it's just a lot, you know? And when you're in 10 group chats and there's 10 different people all trying to communicate something, you kind of just want a way to escape from it all. And it's super overwhelming when like there's 45 different messages in these 10 group chats, and like I get caught out all the time where like, oh, you did not see the message in group chat. Is this because of me not being like having these archives and only checking them like once a day maybe? Or is it down to just the sheer volume? And I'm blaming the sheer volume. Like, because like our club has 10 group chats. So what happens is there's
so many.
The normal communications. And by the way, this isn't even including the separate group chats for our teams within the club. So like my team, I coach 3 different teams. So I'm in 3 different group chats. So like there's 13 group chats in total. For other coaches, they might coach more. So it's like I can't keep up with everything. So if someone's made a request to me and they've not atted me, good luck. So I'm not
Yeah.
looking for this. I'm not going to scroll through a group chat that I don't think I'm going to be even for to find out if you ask something of me. It's a lot. So no.
I totally agree, because with Discord, for example, there's a chat, there's a group I'm in, but I will see a notification. It isn't really for me. I'm just also in a group that I have left, but I'm technically a part of it's like one of the subgroups. So I get tagged in with that thing. But that's the only time I ever look at it, and there's way too much chat. Like there's way too much text. I'm not going to read everything, and I'm not. And I don't, and I've completely removed notifications for that channel unless, I think channel's the right word, unless, there is unless there is like an app. And that's the only thing that comes up, because I can't work within, I'm not keyed into it. Again, I think I think that totally makes sense. I think we talked about this before, about how we feel about group chats in general, and the struggle we have with like notifications that, or not even just notifications, but discussion that's not necessarily at us, like if I'm in a group, like in real life, right, in a group, not a group chat, if there's someone talking, I will pay attention to them, even if, and as soon as I start paying attention, I'm essentially being talked at, whatever, however you want to feel, like with the nature of that. But a lot of the time in a group chat, someone is talking and I'm like, oh, this isn't relevant to me, because the context doesn't make us relevant to one another, if that makes, like, in the way that being in a group in real life does, where you're like literally near each other, like, which we're engaging each other with our conversations and company, or we're talking about something that's I need to know about because I'm there, right? Like there's some important point as to why I'm there and not somewhere else in the world. But if I'm at home and then someone else is at their own home or out or something like that, and there's a message going on, I don't like, what am I like? We're already so disconnected, and there isn't much connecting us. And I'm just, essentially, it just becomes like a bulletin board that shouts at you no matter where you are in the world. And it's like, it's still kind of weird, and it still kind of feels, I don't know how to describe it. Sometimes it makes me feel isolated, even though I'm more connected, because I feel like I'm not involved with the thing I'm hearing. Like I'm kind of watching a conversation happen and I'm not there, kind of thing.
Yeah, like I get that a lot as well. Like I'm in a group chat with like a bunch of like early to mid 30s, early 40s white men. And like they'll be discussing things and I'm just like, cool, this is great. And I'll laugh, react to the thing that makes me laugh because it's related to something I can actually recognize. But like after time, we're going to this pub, lads. And cool, it's great and all, but like, like I've started to go out more, but still, it's more like a, what do I get from this conversation? Not much. I can withdraw from it entirely, and you feel bad, but also this isn't for you in a way. So yeah, it could be your destiny. Like you could, like this is what I mean. This is what this stuff does. Though I'll say this, like you find yourself exhausted. Yes, it's 9 o'clock as we're recording this, but I find myself exhausted by just reading WhatsApp messages.
I get you.
So it's a lot of it is just like, do I really need to do this in order to achieve something with like a team in this sport? Do I really need to be tired 24/7? And I'm trying to ask myself like another question of, if I'm tired from this, do coaches and managers at the elite level, are they always tired? Like the first thing a manager does when he gets sacked is go on a massive holiday, because one, he's been paid out of his contract, which means he's been given at that level and at the elite level millions of pounds to leave his job early. Yes,
Wow.
It sucks, but bro, you've just been given your paycheck immediately. Great news. So
yeah,
you can go
obviously, you probably don't know how much it is either, but like I imagine that's a decent number of years of their wage gifted to them,
so,
like in one go.
Like I think Graham Potter, so Chelsea did it recently, and they had a manager called Graham Potter, and the club in general is a shambles because primarily the Russian owner, Roman Abramovich, he had to sell the club. So they sold it to a American consortium, and they've been trying to implement their own style, and it's not really worked out. So they've gone through quite a few different managers, and they brought in Graham Potter as the original one. Like, this is the guy who's going to lead us to the next stage. And they had to sack him because things weren't going well. Here's compensation. So originally, here's how it gets better. Chelsea paid 25 million to Brighton to buy this guy out of his contract at his previous club. And then when they sacked him from Chelsea, it's around 13 million plus that they've had to now pay him. Like, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And when you sack a manager, like, you have to still pay them, of course. So it's a lot. It's just a lot in general.
Yeah. No, it's the kind of decision making, obviously, that happens because it has to. But it's the kind of decision making where it's like, where it's just unfathomable, because the idea of getting sacked from a job and earning more than you'll ever earn in your entire life for doing so is just fundamentally outside of the scope of. It's not just what most people can expect. It's a case of just what anyone expects of society. You know what I mean? Like, no, like who. The idea of it, the expectation that I could be paid £13 million for any reason is honestly mind blowing. Like, I just can't imagine what would ever kind of create that scenario. Partly because the value of money is so, I guess, for so many people, is obviously so different.
Yeah, but like,
than
imagine getting paid
at the international stage and all of that. Yeah,
like, imagine getting paid like imagine like if you were to be fired from the supermarket in which you work at. Like, imagine being paid out of that. But because contract work in like supermarket work, anything that is like a zero contract, if anything, or not that same way, then getting money from it is impossible. So you can just be fired without any sort of, compensation paid.
There has to be a reason, obviously, for no compensation. That's kind of within the waiver of the contract, if you will. Like, the contract stipulates all of the ways in which you can be fired. What are the laws of the company, I guess is the right, like, it's not laws exactly, but the rules of the company stipulate what they can get you on, right? And there's lots of things that they could get you on, and lots of them most people would agree, like, to a certain extent. Like, it's hard. There are occasions where it's like, okay, there are occasions where, like, some of these rules feel correct. Like, society should have people working in supermarkets who care about, like, food safety, for example, or, care about, like, hey, if making sure that, like, a label represents whether something has, like, especially for, like, baked goods, whether they have, like, particular ingredients that someone could be allergic to, right? Like, things like this. And so it has to come down on someone's head. If something happens, if someone has an anaphylactic shock of any kind, then it would then meaningfully someone should be in trouble. Obviously, that can be very complicated as to why that happens, but the whole point is that there are certain rules that make a lot of sense. But you're right in the sense that it would be the idea of that essentially there's a certain level of security I have, but the problem is that some of these rules are quite finicky, and one thing that ultimately ends up being completely harmless could end up putting me out of a job. I can't quite express exactly what I'm referring to, but there are examples of rules where it's kind of more internal company rules that could get me out of a job, even though there's no actual negative impact because it affects the company. Let's just put it that way. Or the company doesn't want certain behavior. I don't mean like sexual harassment or anything like that. I mean different kinds of behavior.
I was just thinking if you were to like bang in a girl wearing supermarkets attire.
Oh, I see. Like if I represented the company outside in a way that was considered poor, for example. I think there's examples, situations like that. Yeah, but
like if you were to like, no,
actually, I don't know. I genuinely don't know for that how that works personally. I've not looked at my contract more recently to kind of work out if that's true.
like if you were to like, I don't know, dick somebody down and then like slap a clearance tag from like Asda or whatever on their forehead, like, like I don't know, like that's the only be like, and that's smart price, and like click your fingers.
By the way, sorry, let's just to go back to something we were talking about before, because I do want to check something. There was one thing I was thinking about which was sort of a 2-stage interview process, where when I went to do physics at Bristol, which was a foundation course because I hadn't done maths, so I had to do a foundation course for the physics degree, which I didn't end up doing. Mental health just kind of fucked me very early on, and I completely blew the year basically too early. In that I didn't go in enough, and I had to go in at certain times, and essentially lab work I'd fallen behind on to the point where it wasn't like where I got the chance to maybe go back the next year. But by that point, I decided I was going to do a different degree, which I don't know how I feel about that now, but it doesn't really matter. Like as in whether I should have taken that decision more specifically. I think it made sense because ultimately there was someone in Bournemouth who I knew, and that had a huge impact. By the way, there's like a weird like shaking in the background from time to time.
Yeah,
it's not been too bad, but it was just quite bad.
Pick it up.
Sorry, what was I saying? Right. But when I did do that, they initially gave us a test, like a maths test, to basically determine whether we were capable of, because most of the time as well, this isn't I was going straight from school into this, but most of the people are mature people. In fact, I actually had to I actually had to do an email. I actually had to do an email basically justifying why I should be allowed to do the course, like to try to do the course. Like I had to do that myself. But in regardless, I did that. So I did that test, and then I also had an interview afterwards. This feels like it's sort of the opposite way around, where now you're doing more of an in-person test in the second portion. Could you say? I forget exactly. I forget exactly the job role that you're applying for, if you even mentioned it, which is why I'm trying not to say anything. But is it something that could be done in a written? It's not a written test scenario, I imagine, that you were describing,
No,
but
it's
like
not. No.
like an in-person. You're going to be kind of actively, partly doing the role for like a short period of time that day, or for part of the day, maybe, or something like that.
I guess so. I'm sure I was struggling to really put together what was needed from me. So I was thinking more, they'll tell me in the next email. And that's what I bank on now.
Okay.
When someone tells me information like, oh, this is the process that we're going to go through, my first thought is, can you email me this? Because I can't retain that information, plus the 15 group chats from a football club, plus maintaining friendships and trying to create relationships with people. Like, that's tough to do. So just send me an email. And if it's something that I care about, I will pick it up. And if it isn't, then that's me. And I will rue the opportunity that I was given.
Yeah. There was this is a weird thing as well, like, but I guess this slightly is reminiscent of the conversation we've been having about like emails and stuff, and what I was trying to kind of say before, because I realized that the way I said it doesn't entirely fulfill what I wanted it to. But it was you saying like, oh, send me an email because I'm not going to remember, that reminded me of this, which is I partly want to take there's a thing of me wanting to use up energy in a direction that I would prefer, like in a productive way. But there's also just taking the burden off of my own brain to do everything for me, which is the idea of like, me and my mom had a conversation about this when they came down for my birthday, of like, take the burden off your brain of like trying to remember to do shit, like make notes, put stuff in your calendar that will constantly notify you of things. Don't rely on your own self to police yourself. And there's a part of me that feels very reasonably that I should be taking that on a lot more, because obviously I would still be policing myself at a certain level. But if there's something that's actively telling me to do something as opposed to, and I have put the effort in at a period of time when I could to try to get myself to do it later or whatever, that I probably should be, that there's then, the idea is essentially, I think the conversation me and mum had was that, like, you're not more correct for just because you're using your own brain to like have this to remember everything, right? Or that you're relying upon your own senses and everything to do it, to get it all right and done for you. Like, there's something to be said in moments where you're able to like hold lots of information in your head and do stuff. But that's I'm actually able to do sometimes. Multitasking doesn't exist, but there are moments I've had in my life that have shown that I'm actually quite good in very at my job, sometimes I have to be like that, right? There's lots of things I have to hold in my head at once at certain times when the shop is really busy, and particularly when I'm at a till, or I have to think about like a delivery coming later with and think about like, the different aspects of the shop that need to be sorted at certain times and things like that. And I can do that. I don't get to do it enough. Otherwise, the job would be a lot more fun. And also, like, ultimately, sometimes you do them and they're quite boring in the ways in which there's a lot of information to hold at hand. That's kind of why I like the idea of doing admin. If I can get into an admin role that's actually quite like, snappy's the wrong word, but like an admin role that actually requires me to like have a big responsibility of communicating and sorting things. I don't know if that's really a good fit, but I'm obviously I'm looking at lots of different roles, and whatever I'll take, really. I just kind of don't want it to be retail if I can help it. Though I'm getting more and more desperate at this point. But the idea in my head in the long run, and especially with like organizing my own life, is taking a bit more of a kind of admin centric notion of my own self, rather than because I'm obviously, it's not just a case that I'm obviously not perfect, because no one is, but it's like I'm so clearly not able to do the things I really think I should be able to do. So me berating myself or getting angry at myself every time I don't do the thing that I think I should be able to do, like, logically, what's the point? And like, like a psychologist would be like, hey, you don't have to do that to yourself. There are ways that you can like put the burden on something else, like, and use something like and weirdly enough, using something like emails as a way of removing your burden, where it's like, information's coming to me. Like, this is all coming here. I check them all. I've done my task. I move on. And then I go to something else. And then I do these sorts of things, and all of that's being done for me. I put on my calendar, like, if something inspires me, I go to my calendar immediately, put something on, or I'll make a note of something, and my notes I'll check, like almost like a to-do list, but not so specific as that. These kind of just ideas floating around so that I don't have to think about them every day. I don't have to think about all things at once. I can just go, let me check on my notes. Cool. Oh, I should do that thing. That thing I can do right now. That thing that I'm looking at, I could do that. Like, I don't have to do the work.
So like, you remove the burden, as you were saying, of the responsibility to constantly to hold yourself accountable over time. Simply,
I think holding yourself
easier.
I think holding yourself accountable is always there. I think, but I think what you're referring to, I agree with, which is the I'm not holding my own brain accountable to remember everything I need to do every day.
Yeah.
Because it's just because ultimately, even if my list is not that big compared to most people, I clearly the number of things I can hold in my head with how distracted I can be by addiction, or like how I just seem to be tired a lot of the time. I have the same thing as you, maybe, I don't know, but I feel really tired a lot of the time with like just living. I think that's partly my fitness. I do actually want to work on that, but like my mental fatigue is very high. And I just think if I get to like put something down somewhere and do not have to pay, and I can actually actively forget that I put it down. Like I don't have to worry about it, because at some point I'm going to look at it, because I've made it. I put down a little thing that says, look at your notes. And then I'll look at my notes and go, oh, that's a good thing. Or at least if I could just have a repository, suppository is the bad one. I got it right the first time. Repository. Suppository isn't a bad thing, obviously. It's just clearly not what I was going for the first time. But a repository of information, an archive, if you will, of information that I can address and go to when I need to, and not have to think. Like, for example, I've just realized now I haven't gotten tickets I haven't got the tickets that I need for my granddad's wake that will be coming up later this month. Like, I haven't done that yet. It's 3 weeks from now.
Do you need train tickets for it, or do you need?
I need train tickets to go home and,
I thought like
come
it was
back.
an event in which needed tickets to go.
No, not like, it's not an event.
Was he a rock star or some shit? Like I'm Ticketmaster, man. I'm in the queue for like 4 days. Like,
wow, with everything I've told you about my granddad and on this podcast, to be clear, if I reveal that my granddad was actually like a fucking rock star, it would be
one half of Oasis.
Yeah. So the idea video part of Oasis. I think I hope that gets across. Like I think it's a mixture of like I said, putting my energy in a productive way, but I also know that it's not about just putting my energy somewhere. It's about actually removing. It's about being more efficient with my brain in a certain way, because I think that ultimately, as well, it doesn't help for my like addiction and general mental health that I'm constantly reminding myself of things in my head I need to do, and I get overwhelmed by the number of things I'm like, oh, I need to do this and this and this and this, and I'm like putting so much pain, like I'm putting so much more suffering on myself than I need to, when I can just go, let me like ostracize this to a part of my, if I'm going to have a phone around all the time, fuck it, use it for like actually something productive and good, considering that if I'm going to keep using it constantly, then I'll try to use it for something worthwhile, and allocating it to these resources, which actually, if I can start thinking of those resources as being in these productive modes as well, it means it's easier for me to pick up my phone and not associate it with an addictive habit that I have, or when I'm going on my laptop, that I can go, okay, I'm less likely, even if I do get distracted, which I imagine I will a lot of the time, to be able to be like, okay, let me, like, knowing that I might go on my laptop specifically to be like, I'm going to go check my emails and do that, or I'm going to check my notes that I have, and on my phone as well. There's like some things you can connect between your phone and laptop, and they'll both have it. I think something like that would be significantly useful, but it's experiment. It's not an experiment of thought, because I thought about this before, but I think I'm just more. I think literally me and you talking about this has kind of crystallized in my mind why it's something that I really think I should be doing, and ultimately I think whether it works or not will actually give me some insight into the way my brain works. Does that make sense? Like, if it doesn't work, that will be helpful, just in the same way that if it does work, that would be extraordinarily helpful. So I don't think I lose anything out by trying to do it. And especially as my mum specifically does that, because she struggles with keeping anything, like she just struggles to remember things, like a lot of things. And it's a way that she's done it. And I've also seen stuff about ADHD, for example. Again, I don't know if I have ADHD or not, but like there's such an overlap that I sometimes, when I look at things about ADHD, I do think to myself, oh, interesting. And I think to myself, well, maybe that means some like little exercises that people do to help. And I think this was actually one of them, which was about like putting alarms on and like and essentially removing the burden from your mind, because it's just very overwhelming, and it means you can have almost like a task list of things to complete. That was all I remember. Like, and so like all of this is coming together, and I'm just thinking, I should probably try, see what happens. Who knows?
Yeah. Life. I don't know. My head just went to a completely different topic. I don't know why I did that.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Sorry, yeah. My head went to just like long-term planning all of a sudden, and I don't really want to dwell on it for too long. So as we approach the 50-minute mark of the show.
Yeah, I was going to say you'll be the last thing that we talk about, I think. So, like,
I was just thinking about how we have so much time in the world technically, but also so little time, and our construct, how we look at the construct of time, the idea of time varies wildly. So some people might be like, we have all the time in the world. Some people feel like every pressing issue is an urgent matter, and like this is very much YouTube philosophy bro motivational speaker stuff, but like,
ooh, okay.
There's this idea of like, oh, as we're growing up, we should be looking to get a mortgage straight away. We should be looking to like set up a savings account. We should be looking to be married at a certain age, own our own car. There's certain like things we have to do, and the route to get there is seemingly the same for everyone in a way, but the details are different. But when we speak to people who call like the pull your bootstraps up generation, who say, hey, back in my day, I had my house paid off by this time. And those people are in government, which is even funnier. And it's like the expectation of what someone is supposed to have or do is still built around the concept of time and how much time do we have. Like, there's people who I know who dedicate damn near 15 to 20 hours of their day focusing on their job that only really pays them for 12 hours. Like, where's the time to build anything meaningful there? And on the topic of long-term like building, how can you pay off a mortgage when it's so expensive? And in order to actually have a mortgage in the first place, you're probably going to have a house. To find a house to buy, you're probably going to need somebody else in your life, probably a romantic partner. But if you dedicate so much of your life to the thing, you know, the job in which you'll pay and finance for these things, then where do you even build a long-term like view of this all? So I was thinking about you in the second stage, and you not having to do a second stage interview, me doing my first ever one. I'm like, wow. I mean, the fact that we're both constantly close to draining and running and empty, it's like when things pick up for us, like let's say I get this job here, let's say you get a job here, and like you're working Monday to Friday. Now, we're both working Monday to Friday, which is crazy for starters. But where's the time? Like, our downtime will be this show here and whenever like we get the chance to breathe on the weekend. But my weekends is work as well. So I'm having a mild crisis of the fact that if I work Monday to Friday, I will have no time because I also work Saturday and Sunday. So where does the downtime come from? And am I going to fall in an abyss? Or am I already in the abyss and is this me trying to climb out of the abyss? Am I alive or am I dying? What is the world? Ah!
I'm trying to think of an answer that even... I think that there's loads of answers to the question. I don't know if I have one that is not slightly... reductive's the wrong word, but I don't know if I have one that's more than just basic as an answer. So I'm not going to give it, but I have ideas in my head about some of these things, but I don't think I have a strong enough idea, because I also don't know how I feel about the time I have that isn't work and what I want that to look like. So I don't even know if what I will say will be relevant even to myself in a few years from now. I think there's definitely something to be said that trying to get anywhere with money and things like that has a lot of cultural assumptions about the kind of jobs you need to be in, the fact that you need to be in a relationship. That is quite a big one. Like, it's like being in a relationship can really help you do a lot of things. Having kids doesn't necessarily do that, but being in a relationship does, right? I mean, there's a lot of people now who are together and don't have kids. Like, that's quite common, and it's becoming more common. You could say, oh, it's just a part of like being the country that we are. Like, it's kind of expected in development. But I think that's reductive. I think of actually looking at how are people viewing their experiences, right? Like how much people think about children and society today. And I think I think that paints a much bigger picture than just simply saying, oh yeah, it's kind of, because I think ultimately as well, the some of that like geography stuff about like this is what happens in countries like this. I think it's true that there is a trend. I think the problem is that it's somewhat descriptive. It's more like a prescriptive idea. It's more trying to it's trying to say that because we've seen this trend, that it's something that happens because of development, even though we've seen it does differ quite a lot across different countries. But I think obviously that harkens to the fact that this larger concept idea isn't necessarily true of the reasons fundamentally why it happens. And it's just that developing countries tend towards having certain things occurring. And that's why. Like, also development is very complicated in that way, like, like development in capitalism, development in feudalism, development in whatever, like, that could have huge impacts on the way that, like, does a developing society under feudalism, like, that probably wouldn't have the same experience as a developing country under capitalism. So we're talking more about capitalism now. And then, so therefore, what is it about capitalism that can produce this sort of thing? I don't think we know. I don't think we entirely understand, like, the all of the things at play, or at the very least, I think that lots of people would love to give answers to explain things without there being a lot of actual knowledge about one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't think there is a definitive answer. I think it's more just witnessed me have a crisis, but we're fine now.
But I think the crisis is real. I don't know how to describe it. I feel like the feeling is mutually understood. There's a mutual agreement by a lot of people, not everyone, but I think there's a lot of people who are getting to certain ages and are facing the same thing that a lot of generations have, which is the expectations of cultural assumptions. And we live in a quite revolutionary period in that doesn't exist as much as it used to. Like, it just doesn't in the same way that it used to. And with that, with a lot of things that are happening around our generation, well, not just our generation, but our time frame, I guess, there's so many different ways you can go, and not necessarily for good. It's just there are lots of ways now, and it's unclear what. I don't know. I think I, in particular, am some of the worst person to talk to about, or to even talk about this, because I am not like. I think I have very odd ideas about myself and the world, or my place within the world, and what I expect of myself, and so on. So it's hard for me to, when I know that, I'm like, I shouldn't I shouldn't presume that everyone's like that, and I shouldn't presume that the world works the way I think it does, because I ultimately think that I have a particular perception that forces me in one direction, but ultimately is not the right way. Anyway, sorry, I was slightly that didn't really answer anything, and that was a bit like kind of just
good. Who needs answers?
It's a bit messy and nothing, but I started off somewhere and I did say something, but then eventually it kind of trailed. So
anyway,
first 80% is all right.
That being said, we're going to take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the wind. See ya.